Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to this very special episode of Dynamics of a Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to Professor James Moriarty, Napoleon of Crime, and archnemesis of Sherlock Holmes. I'm Madeline Quiñones. I'm joined by my lovely co-host,
Parkinson.
And we are here at Sherlollicon 2022, which is very exciting. And our talk today is a study in villainy. So Heather invited us to talk about Moriarty and Moran, and like free our time to do our favorite thing. How could we say no? So this is a weird sort of brand that I set up for myself. It's not the one that I would have originally thought of, but here we are. So Moriarty and Moran being a couple of our favorite characters. Dixie, why do you love these two characters? Let's start with that.
Well, I always love villains, and I especially love villains that are like sort of the equal and opposite to the hero, because I think that can bring out a lot of interesting things about the hero when you contrast the two of them. And as for why I like Moran, I think he's just a fun character. It's nice having a villain with a sidekick. Unfortunately, we don't get to see the two of them together in the canon, but yeah, I think they have a very interesting friendship that isn't explored enough.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, back in January for BSI weekend, we did our discussion about what makes a Moriarty, and kind of our conclusion was that with Moriarty being pushed and pulled in so many different directions, all that you can really say that makes a Moriarty what he or she or they are anymore is that they are, you know, the arch enemy of Sherlock Holmes. So Moriarty in Sherlockian pop culture is defined by their relationship to Sherlock Holmes, which I think is a little unfair to the original character because he's so richly drawn. He's a very specific, indefinite character, and yet I just feel like we don't see enough of him, and it hurts my soul. And then as far as Moran goes, I think in some sense he's even more vivid a character than Moriarty. I think he's a lot of fun, and yeah, I just wish that we got more of the two of them together. I just feel like, you know, if you shouldn't have Holmes without Watson, then you shouldn't have Moriarty without Moran. That's just the law. Why does everybody break the law? So, okay. So we've got a little slideshow presentation because we took a poll on Twitter a few weeks ago. It was actually a rehash of an old poll that we did about what do Sherlockians think about Moran's relationship with Moriarty? Like, how do they see it? Because Moran is not as visible as we feel he should be in adaptations and etc. So we took a poll, and this rehash actually turned out to be a little more successful than our previous one, thank goodness. All right, here we go. Dixie, you ready for this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Professor James Moriarty, the Napoleon of Crime, the organizer of every devil tree, Colonel Sebastian Moran, the best heavy game shot that our Eastern Empire has ever produced, and the second most dangerous man in London.
And here's where we get to the poll.
Options on the Dynamics of a Plot Twitter poll: best friends, lovers, hate, apathy. 24 votes were cast, not huge, but almost 10 votes more than the original sample. This is apathy, so that's 37.5% of 24 votes. At 9 votes, this option won the poll. this is not exactly the outcome we were hoping for. We feel that the empty house does not make sense if Moran at least does not care about Moriarty.
Yes. So kind of opening discussion up briefly as we go through these options. We're curious if anybody here actually voted on this poll and what you voted for. And like, if anybody here is of the opinion that Moriarty and Moran didn't care about each other and why. So anybody out there? Any opinions?
Actually, I voted on your poll.
Oh,
For those
cool.
reasons. And I cannot remember what the vote. I think I voted for the first one. Yes, I was I think I was the best friends because again, you're right. Like it didn't make sense, especially if you go with the beginning of The Empty House where Sherlock explains how he escaped. But as he was climbing up the cliff, Moran's up there like throwing large rocks down at him and then literally follows his butt back to London just to go out and try to assassinate him through a thing like, you killed my boyfriend / bestie, you bastard, how dare you? Fine, I'm taking you out too, type thing.
Yeah.
It was very much an eye for an eye situation.
I wonder, has anybody ever theorized that they were related? Cousins, half-brothers? Is that out there anywhere?
That is not one that I've ever heard of.
It was the first thing that occurred to me when I looked at the list. I was like, we're missing relatives from the options. Probably not father and son, but,
I think everybody just sort of, because you have Holmes and Watson, the alternate of that is Moriarty and Moran, which made perfect sense when they did A Study in Emerald with the entire
just thinking of that.
With the entire twist of that.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even realize it until the end and you're like, oh snap. So yeah, they're almost like the mirror images of each other from Good versus Evil. The main one, the genius and the sidekick, and the genius and the sidekick.
Mm-hmm. So then, moving on, our next.
Okay, so now we have hate, 8.3% of 24 votes. This is somehow 1.992% of the votes. Oh, sorry, it's 1.992 votes somehow.
Yeah, can we just say 2? Gosh sakes. I don't know how Twitter works, how Twitter polls work. 24 should be such an easy number to break up into percentages. Why does Twitter make it more difficult? So,
to be fair, Twitter makes everything more difficult. So.
This is true. Yeah. So this is, we got 2 votes this way. Do not understand it, but okay. And then
Lovers, 25% of 24 votes, so that's 6 votes. In the original poll, only one more vote was cast. We knew you shippers are out there.
So, out of curiosity, does anybody here ship more?
Yes.
My daughter does. Big time. She has pillow dolls and everything.
Oh my.
She doesn't like act things out with them. I'm not trying to say that, but I'm going to shut up now before she hits me.
I think it's most popular with the BBC Sherlock fandom, which is weird because Moran doesn't quite exist in that way in BBC Sherlock.
It still blows my mind. Creation of fandom BBC Moran. The way that they just created this character, and then nothing remotely like him ever showed up in the canon of the show.
And then there's a lot of people who have like fan cast the same actor for that, even though he's never in the show.
Yeah. Michael Fassbender was wildly popular as a fan cast. Still is, apparently.
I mean, to the point that if you see a picture on the Tumblr in there, you just, without even having to label it, you know that's Moran.
Yeah. It's pretty funny.
I just love the fact that the fans just came in and are like, you didn't put Moran, so we're just going to add him anyway. It's fine. He's never even mentioned in the show, but that's okay. We know he's there.
In the Empty Hearse episode, they had like Lord Moran.
Yeah.
I think. I
Yeah,
don't know
they
if that
did.
would be the same person.
I've seen lots of fan fictions where he's like the uncle or the father, and the son is the Moran.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used Lord Moran in a fic, and everybody was really confused because you say Moran and they all think that you mean one thing, and I'm like, no, the canon character.
That's hilarious. Oh, God bless this fandom. All right. So, our final poll option, or rather, our first poll option.
Best friends. 29.2% of 24 votes. This comes out to 7.008 votes, and we have no idea why. Sherlock Holmes refers to Moran as the bosom friend of Moriarty in The Empty House.
And that is the reason why one of the reasons why we take this best friend thing and run with it. So, anybody here who specifically thinks of them as best friends, whether or not you bro TP them, you don't have to. Just out of curiosity.
That's definitely how I see them. And I know I've seen a novel somewhere that was written from Moran's point of view about how he meets Moriarty and everything. And I want to say it came out in the 90s. I'm going to have to look that up now. This has inspired me to try and find it again.
Wait a minute. I know somebody who knows the name of that. And they're on this chat.
Well,
it ain't me.
No. Bree, what's the name of that book?
Are you thinking of
Hi.
one of the Dubervilles?
She's checking. Hold on. No. There's literally a story that's basically just Moran's story, and I know Bree has it.
And I may be wrong about when it was written. I just know that it was either the late 90s or the early 2000s. And I had it, and then I gave it to my kid when she became a big More fan, even though there was no more. There was only more on the show.
Well, the only one that I can think of that I know for sure that's from Moran's perspective is kind of the Dubervilles by Kim Newman, but they're definitely not friends in that one. There is Empress of India, in which at least they actually get along and they have a very fun dynamic, but Moriarty is not a master criminal and Moran doesn't work for him. Moran, in fact, has hired Moriarty to help him steal something, and it's really funny, and there's a lot of banter between the two of them. It's absolutely delightful.
Yeah, Hound of the Dubervilles is what she mentioned as well.
It looks like one of the novellas in that is a volume in Vermilion, which recounts how Moran met Moriarty, and became his little right-hand henchman guy.
Yeah, it's a fun book. Moran is an absolutely horrible person, and there's a very weird dynamic between the two of them in that one. I'm not even sure how to describe it. But yeah.
Apparently there's another one called The File on Colonel Moran.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Has 3 novels in it. The Moriarty, The Hound of the Dubervilles is definitely the one I was thinking of. But The File on Colonel Moran is The Hurlstone Selection, The Man with the Square-Toed Boots, and The Disappearance of Lord Lexingham. I'll pop the link into the chat.
Oh, thank you. So,
Final analysis. 7 voted best friends, 6 voted lovers, 2 voted hate, and 9 voted doesn't care. Despite doesn't care winning the highest number of votes, the first 2 positive options took home 13 votes as opposed to the 2 negative options 11.
So yay! there were two other a couple of opinions on Twitter that didn't quite fit the polls. Was that Trifles and Eggs tweeted, "This is a tricky one. I would say they were very close accomplices, not sure about besties. Moran looked like a loyal dude." And I was like, you know what, that's fair. That would also fit what we've got, that they didn't have a close relationship, but that Moran was nevertheless loyal to Moriarty. Really I think what you need for the empty house to make sense is Moran's loyalty. Beyond that, you can basically kind of do whatever, but the loyalty needs to be there. Otherwise, why is he going after Holmes?
Yeah.
Vulgarweed tweeted, "Lovers, but it's grudgy and grumbling. There ain't sexes. 1000% consensual, but still full of worker resentment on Moran's part." I'm like, okay, that's different, but okay. So those were the only two opinions that we actually got on Twitter, because we asked people to tell us why they were voting the way they were, and most people didn't. It's very frustrating. But yeah, so it just, something that seems to keep coming up again and again is that Moriarty and Moran can't be besties because evildoers can't have best friends, and we're just like, why? But also, to be fair, Dixie and I couldn't think of any other pairs of evil best friends in fiction. I don't know if you guys can think of any, but it's like, for the most part, they just don't exist. You might have, you'll have bosses and henchmen, but that is usually about as far as it goes. The one exception, the one sort of exception that I could think of where they're technically still not friends, but they get along, is Grand Admiral Thrawn and Captain Pellaeon in the old Star Wars Expanded Universe novels. They're not besties, but they get along remarkably well. And this circles back around to Sherlock Holmes because they are basically Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. And I mean, on purpose, they are, but they're evil and in Star Wars. And so essentially they're Moriarty and Moran in Star Wars. So we can't win. We can't find any other examples. Really.
Challenge accepted. Now it's time to go look through and see if we can find anything.
I would love that.
The only thing I came to thought was Bonnie and Clyde, and it's like, no, that doesn't fit in so many ways. But they're not fictional. They are love. Never mind. I'm going to mute now.
I mean, like, I would argue the entire Kylo Ren and Hux parable in the last three books, or
They
sorry,
hate each
last
other.
three movies.
They do hate each other though.
Okay, but I've read the fanfic.
But in canon, they hate each other.
Do they? No, I'm kidding. But it is funny that you mentioned Thrawn, since one of the headcanons and one of the fan casts for Grand Admiral Thrawn is Benedict Cumberbatch. So,
well, the funny thing is that the voice of Thrawn in Star Wars Rebels is none other than Lars Mikkelsen.
okay then.
So,
This probably doesn't count, but what about Bunny and Raffles? Like, technically they're protagonists, but they're also besties. But they do crime.
right. That I did think of Bunny and Raffles. I just
Aren't Bunny and Raffles like supposed to be evil Holmes and Watson? Or like,
Yeah, they're
technically
really
they're
based off of them,
though.
yeah.
They're kind of
I don't think they're evil.
yeah.
No, they're not evil enough, but
Yeah.
they're criminal. They're a criminal pair. So that's kind of close.
Right. That's probably about the closest that we get, really. What is this? Oh, well, yeah. Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, but then also Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy are lovers, so that it's
But
like
originally. Yeah, I just typed in fictional villains with best friends, and that was the first thing that popped up. And I'm like, I'm just seeing comic book stuff, so
yeah.
not sure if that really. I should have said
Oh.
literary.
You know, actually, I did think about Magneto, but I thought about like, well, because my basic exposure to anything Marvel is through movies, and I thought about Magneto and Mystique in the X-Men movies, and they seem to be friends. Except that as soon as Mystique turns human in movie 3, Magneto drops her like a hot potato, which is really rude. So
Yeah, but I think they kind of hinted that towards a father-daughter-esque type of relationship, or an older brother. I thought you were going to say Magneto and Professor X, and I'm like, no, that's going into Sherardi territory.
yes. So, okay, this is interesting. Let's go through the Joker.
The closest example that I have is just from Kim Possible. So,
Hey, I'll take any examples.
Throw it out there, Shelbs.
This is such barren fields here.
like, they're animated villains, but like there are a couple of times where you kind of see certain ones, they'll work together and you can see a friendship dynamic with some of them, while others are more frenemy dynamic.
Yeah, if we're talking about animated, there's Steven Universe has Blue and Yellow Diamond, who I guess are more lovers than friends, but those are villains that like each other.
It just doesn't happen a whole lot,
Yeah.
which is annoying. Criminal masterminds deserve best friends too.
There's lots of lists about villains that people would love to have as their best friend. Not sure that counts. Does that make the people, that sounds more to me like I'm going to write a letter to this guy in prison who's a murderer and tell him I'm going to marry him. But
Sounds like the Charles Manson groupies.
yeah, exactly. I want to be best friends with the Joker. No, you don't.
No.
Trust me.
No.
Write your fan fiction and just leave it at that. You don't want to know. No version.
No.
Unless you're Riddler, then you can be best friends with Joker.
I'm here for that.
What about Gaston and LeFou?
Oh
There you go.
That's
That's an
definitely
unhealthy
more
dynamic.
one-sided. That's a
I thought of that
problematic
one, but-
relationship.
Didn't Disney talk about wanting to make LeFou like canonically gay and hot for Gaston?
Yeah, I think so.
And it's like, why would you do that when you have whatchamacallit, the wardrobe and the candlestick? Or the clock and the candlestick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cogsworth and Lumiere.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
Because they went out of their way to make Lumiere a lady's candle.
This is true.
Man.
They're
With the
an
French.
OT3.
Oh, well, there you go.
Well, yeah, I
That's-
could see Lumiere being bi.
We'll talk about that tomorrow at tomorrow's OT3 panel. We'll be sure to bring that
Yeah.
one up. Which one would you ship with Molly Hooper?
Lumiere.
Done with this. How did we end up here?
Somebody said OT3, and that set us off in the wrong direction. Let's get back to these villainous best friends. I suspect Moran is more loyal to Moriarty than Moriarty would be to Moran
Yes.
in pretty much any version.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah. I can see Moran as someone who has like a strong loyal streak to him, whereas I'm not sure about Moriarty.
Yeah, it's
So
more
that's
of a,
why. Go ahead.
more of a henchman relationship, but I was thinking of Lord of the Rings. Well, not Lord of the Rings so much as like the Silmarillion and the extended universe, but you have more Gotham Sauron, who are I mean, Sauron is the sidekick, but Vulgarweed is not here, but she talks about evil Hufflepuffs. And I think that, she made the case for Sauron being an evil Hufflepuff.
Oh
and
my
I think that
God.
Moran is also an evil Hufflepuff.
I
Because his primary, like, traits are, loyalty and like friendship and hardworkingness and stuff. So he is a Hufflepuff, just evil, as
wow.
opposed to like a Slytherin or something like Moriarty or
Yeah.
Ravenclaw. I guess I've heard Moriarty sorted into either Slytherin or Ravenclaw, depending
I would say Ravenclaw.
on. But anyway, I just think that so Sauron and Morgoth are besties, or lovers, depending on your take on the fanfic. And I think that Sauron and Moran are both evil Hufflepuffs.
Oh my gosh. That is a take that I was not expecting to hear today, but I'm here for it.
It's Vulgarweed's take. I wish she were here because I know she, wrote on your poll on Twitter and stuff. And
I just thought of one. Megamind and is it Minion? The thing in the fishbowl? They seem like friends more than that was kind of a reach, but
No, that's a good one.
Designed as the henchman, but became like that conscience best friend more than.
That's great.
Oh, I just thought of another pair in Gotham. Fish Mooney and what's the guy's name? Her henchman who was very loyal to her.
Oh,
I've suddenly forgotten his name.
Bruce?
Butch? I think
Wait,
Butch?
who are we talking about?
Butch?
In
Gotham.
Gotham.
Oh, Gotham.
So Fish Mooney's henchman.
Oh no, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
His name was Butch. I think it was something like that.
It's been so long since I've been watching the show. But yeah, you're right.
Because he was very loyal to her. They had a good relationship.
They did have a good relationship. That's true. Yeah, definitely in an uneven power dynamic.
Yeah.
But in terms of them and in terms of Moriarty and Moran, because of course Moriarty is Moran's employer.
Yeah.
Not forgetting that. But at the same time, it's not it's not altogether it is. I don't know. I'm just thinking about the dynamic between Holmes and Watson, but I guess technically, Watson does choose actually to go along with Holmes on adventures. And at the same time, I suppose Moran does choose to work for Moriarty. Yeah. He could quit if he wanted to.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like it's uneven until Moriarty realizes that Moran could kill him at any moment and take over. Because I think they're kind of equally matched in that regard, and that's why he keeps him so close. It's kind of like, keep your friends close and your enemies closer kind of thing. So I think it's uneven until a certain point.
Yeah, that's
I've got the bronze. You've got the brains.
Exactly.
Make lots of money.
Exactly.
Lots of money.
What about Pinky and Brain?
Oh,
for
Pinky's
evil
not a
friends.
villain. Pinky's not evil. Come on. Pinky's not evil. Pinky's a mousy himbo. He fits the. Does he not fit?
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I mean, he's not big and muscular, but he's a mouse. So.
What about Princess Bride?
Oh.
But
they're not really.
Anna and Humperdinck?
Yeah, Humperdinck.
That's true.
That has potential. Mm-hmm.
Ishtar came up with Crawley and Dean Winchester when Dean was going through his besties with Crawley phase.
Yeah. Does that fall under the heading of temporary insanity? I didn't watch Supernatural, so I only vaguely know things from Tumblr.
I'm not sure. Like, they were really good besties, and like Crawley was really upset when Dean broke up that friendship, romance, whatever it was.
Crawley was the one who was really out for himself, really. So
yes,
but it depends if you categorize Dean to be villainous, because isn't the whole point of this trope to be like both villainous characters and
Yeah.
their friendship? Joelle, in the the thing that you posted, I saw the Harry Potter musical team up of Quirrell and Lord Voldemort in there. I'm like, oh, okay.
Talk about being stuck with each other.
Never being able to see eye to eye in a relationship. They do nail that.
Oh, you win, Misty. You win.
A good one.
Interesting.
So, what is it about Moriarty and Moran that interests everybody? So, what brought you to being interested enough to do this podcast about it, Madeline?
Actually, because I was doing a comic about them.
That's where the artwork comes from. That was in our slideshow.
Yeah, I was doing, and I can link it really quick. The Adventures of Professor Moriarty, and just doing this cutesy universe in which they don't actually do anything that's that terrible so far. All that they've really done is like spy on Sherlock Holmes. But yeah, I don't know. I just originally
Well, what made you do the comic? Why did you do the comic? How'd you come up with that? That's what we need to know.
Well, I came up with the comic because I saw somebody else do a cute web comic about, it was actually The Adventures of Mrs. Hudson. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that, but it's adorable. And I wanted to, and I was like, oh, I want to do my own cutesy Sherlockian comic. And then I'm like, but I can't do it about Holmes and Watson because then I just know I'm going to end up accidentally plagiarizing. And so then I'm like, I got it. I can do Moriarty and Moran. So I ended up developing this dynamic of Moriarty being the quirky, introverted genius and Moran being his slightly obnoxious but well-meaning best friend. And so you get things like Moran dragging Moriarty off to go get a Christmas tree to brighten up his office and things like that. But yeah, I don't know. I like the kid. Once I started looking more into the two characters, I'm like, these are actually really great bad guy characters. And it's like, why don't they show up more in stuff as like themselves, how they are actually described in canon. And I just wanted to do more stuff with them. And then as I was doing the comic, I realized I'd always wanted to do a podcast, could never figure out what to do it about. And then I was like, wait a second, Dixie and I are always talking about Moriarty. Like, let's take this on the road.
So, what did you think of Andrew Scott's Moriarty? Is he your favorite version, as he should be? I mean, as I think he is, or
well, Dixie can answer this question.
Yeah. So he was the first. No, I'm lying. He wasn't the first Moriarty I saw. That was Daniel Davis in Star Trek. He's great. But he was the first one I saw in a proper Sherlockian adaptation, and I really like him. Now my favorite is Eric Porter, but I still like Andrew Scott a lot.
What's Eric Porter in?
The Granada Sherlock Holmes is Jeremy Brett.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Eric Porter is my favorite Moriarty. I don't really like Andrew Scott's Moriarty so much. I don't like what they did with him, but nevertheless, he is definitely one of the best actors, I think, to have ever played a Moriarty. So I have to give huge props to Andrew Scott himself because he's terrific.
Yeah.
I just would have liked something a little more like the canon character. But the show is not really the canon characters. So
What about the movies, the Robert Downey Jr. movies? I cannot think of the actor that played
Jared
Moriarty there.
Harris. Yes.
I thought he was great.
He is great. He's terrifying. He just absolutely terrifies me.
And we actually get Moriarty and Moran together in that, which is great.
Yes. I think that they understood Moran very well. I think that they understood the relationship between the two of them. One of my favorite moments actually is like when Moriarty's doing the book signing and there's this empty chair beside him. And you're like, why is there that empty chair? And then you see Moran come in and just sit in the chair next to him. And it's just like, oh, I love it. And then later when Moran just gets absolutely feral about Moriarty getting hurt. And it's just like, yes, this is the Colonel Moran content that I signed up for.
I think it fits the Hufflepuff dynamic.
Yes, it does. It really does. Oh my gosh.
You're going to have a whole podcast about Hufflepuff, Moriarty, and Moran in the future. I can just wait for that.
Oh my gosh. That's terrific though. Actually, here's an interesting notable absence of Moran is actually in Star Trek Next Generation with Daniel Davis Moriarty. Because in his second episode, he is given a love interest, and this is the early 90s. They weren't going to give him a gay love interest, but they could have given him a best friend, but they didn't. Instead, you get Countess Regina, which, to be fair, if Moriarty was gonna hook up with a lady, I do think that she would be his type. Nevertheless, it's just like, we could have had Moran. You could have done that. And I just got to feel like maybe one of the reasons that they didn't go there was that the Countess at least maybe possibly made Moriarty a little bit more sympathetic because she was technically an innocent party in all this. And she wasn't a criminal. She was just in love with one. Moran is definitely a criminal. So he's maybe slightly less sympathetic as a known assassin.
Do you see that very often where they like gender bend Moran to make it like more of a traditional coupling, since some people don't want to do that?
I don't think that, I don't know that that's ever really happened, because I think that the more common thing to do is just to ignore Moran altogether.
I would argue that, I was going to say, I would argue that BBC Sherlock's Mary Morstan is kind of a gender bent Moran, at least in the MTR. Well,
definitely
not the MTR episode, but their play on the MTR.
Yes,
yeah, definitely.
And I think there was a lot of like fandom theories that she actually
was. I was happy that those didn't pan out, because that is not what I wanted out of Mary. Of course, what we actually were given with Mary was not really what I wanted out of Mary, but whatever.
The main thing I wanted was for her to not die, which unfortunately we didn't get either.
Yes. Like, can we just not fridge her just at least once? At least once. And then who even knows what'll happen if Kelly Riley will ever come back. Will ever even get the chance to come back as Mary in a third Robert Downey Jr. movie. We are still stuck waiting for them to even get started producing it properly. Actually, I am going to take a quick moment to, since we've got free airtime, to bash, just kind of tongue in cheek, Sherlock Holmes in New York with Roger Moore as Sherlock Holmes. Because the way that it starts out in Moriarty's evil lair, which, okay, cool. He's got this big fancy lair down by the river that has trapdoors. And I'm like, I can get behind this. And Moran shows up to tell him about how this operation has gone down successfully, and they get all excited together. And then while Moriarty is like working on the blackboard, suddenly the Moran figure starts taking apart stuff, and oh, it's Sherlock Holmes, in fact, disguised as Moran. And then he makes a point of saying, not only have Holmes and the police rounded up Moriarty's gang, including Moran, Holmes makes a point of saying that Moran is too scared to talk. And I'm like, he should have been too loyal to talk, is what I think you were going for there. And I like to say that was my first inkling that this movie wasn't going to be so great. And indeed, it did go downhill from there. It went very steeply downhill. And I'm like, way to go for like totally missing just a little opportunity there. It is a cracky mess of a movie, my gosh.
I have to admit, my favorite part was that Irene Adler with her violin playing son. That was the first time I'd seen that. And I had always, since I was first read A Scandal in Belgravia, been a Sherlock and Irene shipper. And that lasted up until Molly Hooper kind of edged her out of the way.
Well,
but in that movie, I loved that he had a secret son that was just like, that hits all my buttons right there. I don't care how bad the movie is. It hit those buttons.
That's fair. I was just like, I ship Sherlock and Irene, but like I could, and I'm an amateur writer, but I could still write such a much better Sherlock and Irene story. Like, my gosh.
There's a series of novels by Carol Nelson Douglas featuring Irene Adler. They've got Moran. There's Moran in one of them, and I'm trying to find out. I have them, so I'd have to go down and look. But I was trying to find the name of the title so I could give you a link, because he's a pretty major feature in that one. Moriarty is not, but I thought that they did a decent job with his character. But I haven't read it in a few years, so I may have to reread that. But I'm trying to find the title so I can link it for you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I am always open to more Moran content. So yeah.
As soon as I find it, I will throw a link in here.
Irene at Large. Okay, thank you. I will definitely look into that. I've got a couple of hard copies, and I've also started acquiring them on Kindle because I am more likely to get through Kindle ebooks than physical books at this point in time.
I listen to audiobooks all the time in my car now. I get Sirius XM trying to get me to sign up, and I'm like, no, I listen to audiobooks. Go away. I got to find some of these books on audio now. I'm all fired up. I've already been through the Poirot's. It's time for Sherlock.
Yeah, that'd be a great idea, Heather, to compile a book recommendation list from all these.
I definitely recommend, I don't know if this is on audiobook or not, but Empress of India by Michael Kurland, because that is just an absolute delight. It does not focus as much on Moriarty and Moran as I would like it to, because Mr. Kurland also likes his OCs. So that's a thing. But there's so much banter and a lot of Moriarty doing the Sherlock Holmes thing of like doing lots of weird stuff and not telling anybody, why he is having all this stuff done. And Moran's just here watching him like, Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Why are you so weird? What is going on here? So much fun.
Yeah, I started reading that, and then I don't know, I got sidetracked. That was a number of years ago now, and then I haven't gotten back into it, but I need to finish it eventually because it was a lot of fun.
It was so much fun. And that was the only book in which he actually wrote the two of them together. He has this whole Moriarty series. And yet, he chose violence. He only put Moran proper in one book and cameoed him in another, and then like changed his mind about how to write Moran in between the two of them. Because in the first time Moran appears, Moriarty describes him as unstable as nitroglycerin, and that's just not the characterization that we get of him when he then appears in Empress of India. So it's interesting. It's like, was Moriarty wrong, or did Mr. Carlin just change his mind? Or both. Technically, both can happen.
Moriarty learned differently. That's what happened.
Yes.
Off camera.
But it's a lot of fun. So we've got just a handful of minutes left. Anybody else want to say anything about Moriarty and Moran together or separately? Any thoughts?
Just the
Your
obvious
ship
one.
name is the cutest.
So
What?
which one of you guys is Moriarty and which one is Moran?
I know who I want to be.
And that's where we're leaving it.
We're leaving it there.
Thank you very much. It was a great podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Panel pod.
Well, yeah. Thank you, Heather, for having us, and thank you guys for participating.
No.
What this actually comes out to is basically our 1 year anniversary episode, because we started, I forget the exact date, but it was basically about this time last year that we posted our first episode. So we've been going at this for a year. It's been a crazy year, but thank y'all for making this such a great podcast panel.
Thank you both for agreeing to come on to the con and do a panel on this. I appreciate it.
Well,
and it was interesting and exciting, and yay.
Thank you for inviting us. It was so much fun.